China.
China. China. China. China. China. China. China. China. China.
China idolizes the US, whether you realize it or not. They seek to emulate America's behavior in every possible way. Look at the way the Americans expanded their territory in the 18th and 19th centuries. Massive expansionism. The Chinese are following that playbook. They seek to emulate America's behavior. And India is very much in China's crosshairs, and there is the very real possibility of war between India and China. But that need not happen. India can ensure that there is peace between the two nations. And I'm going to give you 5 things that India must do that will ensure peace between the two nations. Please subscribe and let's find out what these 5 things are. This video is brought to you by my Geopolitics course, Geopolitics from First Principles. The link is in the description below. So take a look at where the Great Wall of China is. It's kind of in the middle of China today, but historically it used to be the borderlands of China. It used to be the border of China, the outer border, and beyond the wall were the barbarians, according to the Chinese. But the Chinese have ensured that the Great Wall is now in the middle of the country. And so much territory has been captured by the Chinese. Manchuria was never Chinese. Southern Mongolia was never Chinese. The Uyghur region, Xinjiang, was never Chinese. Neither was Tibet, neither was Yunnan, and so on. But they have captured all of this, and they seek more. They have territorial disputes with almost all of their neighbors, including India. India is a major dispute. They seek more Indian territory. And there is a massive power asymmetry between the two nations, between India and China. And that is what is the driver. That is the driver of the Chinese belligerence against India. And there is a very real threat of war. The Chinese miss no opportunity to disparage and attack India online, whether it is via the Global Times, whether it is via their official spokespeople, and the attitude is kind of condescending. The attitude is disrespectful. The attitude is that of attacking the nation. The attitude conveys a very well thought out lack of respect towards India. So that is the situation between India and China, and there is a very real threat of war. When you have two large nations, very powerful nations with a common border and with a disputed, a border dispute, there is the very real chance of war, especially given the power asymmetry between the two nations. So I'm going to give you 5 things India must do. The onus is entirely on India, by the way. The onus to ensure that there is peace between the two nations is on India. It's not on China. Let's be very clear about this. Right? India needs to ensure that China gains respect for India. And you cannot demand respect. You have to change yourself, your characteristics, your attributes, and command respect. You can't demand respect, you can command respect. Let's say you walk out of your door in the morning one day, and in the garden you see a squirrel. Will you respect that squirrel? You'll say, no, you'll say it's cute, but you won't respect the squirrel. Let's say you see a rabbit. You won't respect the rabbit. You'll like it. You'll say it's cute. But let's say you see a rhinoceros or an elephant or a tiger. That brings instant respect. You're going to bolt inside and close the door and wait as many hours as necessary for that beast to go. So every beast has its own characteristics. And the larger and more powerful the beast is, the more respect it commands. So that is what India needs to remember. So India needs to stop expecting China to change its behavior. China won't change its behavior. You can't expect a cat to start behaving like a dog. You can't expect a horse to start behaving like a tiger. Every beast has its own characteristics, its own attributes. So India needs to change its attributes. If India wants to command China's respect and stabilize the situation between the two nations and reduce the chances of war. So what are these 5 things that India must do? The first thing is India must ensure that there is sustained economic growth for a long period of time, ideally 10 to 20 years at least. That is non-negotiable. Take a look at this comparison between the two nations. You can see that there is a massive asymmetry between India and China. This is the global power rankings that I have created. I'm going to be releasing it soon. These are the top 10 nations. You can see that the US and Russia have a major gap. The hard power score, there is a big disparity between the US and Russia. Once again, between Russia and China, there's a massive disparity. And similarly, between China and India, there is a massive disparity. So that is the gap India needs to bridge. China is currently the 2nd largest economy. India is the 5th largest economy. So India needs to ensure that there is sustained economic growth for 10 to 20 years. And the economic growth should not just be sustained. It should be rapid, not very rapid, not 8, 10, 12%. That's not possible in today's environment where most of the economies are heading towards recession. But India needs to have decent good growth, 6% plus growth, maybe 7% plus, maybe even touching 8% is good. We don't mind that. Beyond that may not be possible, but this needs to happen for a decade or two. That will close the gap. So India is very much on track to become the third largest economy in the world in the next 3 to 5 years. So then it will be the US, China, and India. And that's how it's going to be. So that will, if you do this over time, it will reduce the gap between the two nations. So that is one thing, the first thing India needs to do. India needs sustained economic growth. The second thing, once again, take a look at this chart. You can see there's a massive gap in the military capabilities between India and China. China is number 2 from the military perspective. It has, you cannot see it here, but there's a massive disparity between the military expenditure of China and India. China's military expenditure is about 3.5 times that of India. And China's China's GDP is about 5 times that of India. So you can see there is a massive gap over here. So India needs to bridge that gap. So if you see this chart, you will see that India's military expenditure is rising every year. But on the other hand, it is declining as a percentage of GDP. So maybe India needs to up that right now and maybe increase the military expenditure a little bit more as a factor of the percentage of GDP, maybe up it to 3%. And as the economy grow, even a 2% spending of GDP in terms of military expenditure will be quite significant. So India needs to expand its military capabilities. India needs to ensure that there is indigenization of military technologies, stop buying things from other countries. India has a massive industrial base. Leverage that, ensure there is indigenization of all kinds of defense equipment. India is already producing its own fighter planes, the Tejas fighter plane. India needs to indigenize its submarines, navy, tanks, howitzers, artillery, whatever else, guns. So India needs to manufacture everything within India. India needs to become a major defense producer, military equipment producer, and India needs to increase its military might and military capabilities, especially in the northern border. So India has a massive northern border with Tibet, which is currently occupied by China. It's a mountainous border. So India needs to invest in the military capabilities over there. India has already deployed about 200,000 soldiers to face off against the Chinese forces up there, and more needs to be done. The infrastructure needs to be ramped up, which is currently happening. So India needs to invest more in its military and make sure that the military is indigenized, the technologies are indigenized, the equipment is indigenized, and that will ensure that there is not too much of a dependency on external powers, and that will obviously give it more of parity vis-a-vis China. So the second thing is military capabilities. The third thing is naval power, which is kind of part of the military capabilities, but I am considering this separately. See, the way to make the Chinese behave in India's northern borders with Tibet, that the key to making the Chinese behave lies in the ocean. So the Chinese seek to become an Indian Ocean power. Right now, they're kind of hemmed in by the various island chains, the first, the second, the third island chains. They kind of feel hemmed in. The Americans have ring-fenced them, but they are churning out warships and submarines like sausages, right? And they want to have such a large navy that they can kind of dominate the Pacific, the South China Sea region, as well as the Indian Ocean region. They want to become an Indian Ocean power as well. So India needs to make sure that India invests in its naval capabilities. India needs more submarines. How many submarines does India have? I would say India needs about 50 submarines. And India needs more warships. It doesn't have to be the most expensive warships. Quantity, like Stalin said, has a quality of its own. More missile boats, more destroyers, more submarines. They need not be the most expensive and most technologically advanced ones, but quantity has a quality of its own. And if India gains the capability to genuinely blockade certain choke points that exist in this region, you don't need to actually do it, but you need the capability to do that. And for that, you need numbers. So India needs to invest in numbers when it comes to the Navy. And India needs to ensure there is distributed lethality instead of concentrated lethality. That's a concept that I'll not go into right now. But naval power is the key. The key to making China behave in the north lies actually in the Indian Ocean region. Then China will behave. So naval power is important. Then there needs to be multi-alignment and economic engagement. That's the fourth thing India needs to do. In certain schools, there are bullies right? Now, who do these bullies? Who does the school bully typically pick on? The bully typically picks on the lonely kid, the loner, the introvert, the one who doesn't have too many friends. Such kids are easy for a bully to pick on and harass. But let's say you are the popular kid, you have lots of friends, everyone likes you. The bully is not going to pick on you. So, India needs multi alignment. India needs to make friends with everybody. India needs to have engagement, mutually beneficial engagement, whether it is trade, whether it is culture, whether it is military engagement, whatever, with a large number of nations. India needs to ensure it has lots of friends as far as friends go in geopolitics. And the key to that is economic engagement, trade relationship. If there is a significant amount of trade between the two nations that both nations benefit from, then that nation, you can say in geopolitical terms, is your friend. So India needs to engage, multi-alignment, multi-engagement, multipolar engagement, and friendship with everyone, good relations with everyone. And India is doing exactly that right now. India is currently doing these freedom of navigation operations in the Western Indian Ocean region, near the Gulf of Aden, the Red Sea, all that. It is something that is generating a lot of goodwill among the Gulf nations, because it's kind of, taking that headache off from them. India is ensuring that it is the net security provider in this region, and it is expecting nothing in exchange. When the COVID crisis happened, the COVID pandemic, India sent large amounts of vaccine vials to any country that needed them for free. India did not charge for the vaccines like the Chinese or the Americans did. So that has obviously caused a great amount of goodwill. India needs to keep on doing this, and India needs to keep engaging with lots of countries, with every single country that's possible, diplomatically, and especially from the perspective of trade. And that builds this network, and it causes this network effect. And that builds a lot of goodwill, the kind of goodwill China is unable to build because of its predatory practices. And India needs to leverage its historical relations with the Eastern African nations, the Southeast Asian nations, its historical cultural ties with nations, and even genetic ties with Southeast Asia and all the way to Japan. So there's a tremendous amount of historical goodwill that India has earned over the past 3,000 years. India needs to start leveraging that. So that is number 4, multi-alignment and economic engagement. And the last thing India needs to ensure is that there is political stability in India, and there is a high quality of leadership. Currently, there's great leadership in India. Mr. Modi is a tremendously good prime minister. He has completely transformed the nation in the past 10 years. But there needs to be political stability. If in 24 a coalition government comes to power, then that's going to be a disaster for India, because these governments can fall like 9 pins, and then there's a round of instability and leaderless situation in the country. So political stability is key for the next 20 years. The same party, essentially the same kind of government, and the same policies. Policies cannot keep changing. Every time a new government comes to power of a different party, the policies take a 180-degree U-turn. And that is disastrous for a nation that seeks to survive. India is currently actually striving to just keep on existing. And it's a dangerous situation. The next 20 years are a very delicate situation for India. It's a very delicate time for India. So India needs political stability and high quality leadership. And especially whenever the current leader steps down and moves on, there needs to be a proper transfer of power to the right person or set of people. That is critical for any nation. And when that doesn't happen, that's when you have empires and civilizations declining and falling. You need continuity in terms of quality of leadership. So that is number 5. So these are the 5 things India needs to do to ensure that it gains China's respect. And if India rises by doing this, then this chart that you see, and this very visible disparity between India and China, that will significantly reduce in the next 20 years. And by 2050, it is possible that India may actually overtake China because of China's slowdown. China's economic slowdown, its tremendously bad, dangerous demographic decline that is impending. Its TFR has dropped to less than 1.1 and so on. So this is the time for India to really push forward and do these things, make sure that it just focuses on growth the next 20 years. And if it does that, the gap between the two nations will significantly decline. And when two nations are reasonably evenly matched, the chance of war actually goes down drastically. So that is what India needs to do. These 5 things India needs to focus on. Keep your eyes on the ball, keep playing the ball, forget all the other noise, forget all the sledging, forget the chatter. Keep your eyes on the ball and keep playing one ball at a time. And that's how you go forward. And that's how India can ensure that there is lasting peace between India and China. Of course, the true root cause of the issues between India and China is the fact that the Chinese are currently in occupation of Tibet. Tibet was never Chinese. India and China have never had a common border for 3,000 years. This is a new situation, and that is the root cause. Eventually, whenever it happens, Tibet will once again regain its freedom. Hopefully, it will still have some Tibetans within it. If you look at the US, the Native American population is about 2% of the US. So they have essentially been wiped out. And that's what the Chinese are trying to do in Tibet as well. But hopefully, if the Tibet becomes free in the next 20, 30 years, then there may still be some Tibetans left. And then there can be lasting peace between India and China. Until Tibet is within China, it's part of China, India needs to keep doing these things. And that is what will ensure that there is lasting peace between India and China. So that's about it. Thank you for watching, and I will see you in the next video.